Hey, welcome back to another episode of Interventions and Detentions. I'm Brad.
And I'm Kylie.
And we are set for episode 1.7, episode number 7.
Nice. Very good.
And this week's episode is entitled MTSS, More Tears, Less Tears.
Clever. That was clever.
Kind of clever. We'll talk about what exactly kind of tears we're talking about through this episode. I'm excited. MTSS is not an exciting topic necessarily, but it's a topic that schools are dealing with on a daily basis, and we're going to talk about what that looks like here at Central Noble Primary. And, you know, Kylie, you are our MTSS interventionist, part of the title of this podcast. You want to briefly explain what MTSS is as we get into today's episode?
Absolutely. So MTSS, for short, is Multi-Tier System of Supports, which is a huge name for basically interventions that you do to meet kids' needs. That's what I think.
What kind of needs are we talking?
Needs. Just any of them.
So behavioral?
Behavioral needs.
Social
needs.
Academic.
Emotional.
Emotional. Okay.
And it can be kind of a whole range. When you think about academics specifically, it's not just kids who are struggling, but also our high ability can be part of MTSS, those individual interventions. It really covers the whole thing.
Okay.
And that's kind of the cool part, and that's why I really like this position, because my days are very different every single day.
They are. You don't have a set... I mean, you have a schedule of kids that you meet with, and I'm sure we'll hit on that today, but you don't know from one second to the next what kid you might need to grab for what reason at any given moment. And
one of the cool things, too, with MTSS, because it is so individualized, one intervention that you might use with someone for one thing is not the same that's going to work for another. So that's what kind of changes each day, too. Like, if one kid's struggling with something today, I'll try this intervention. It might not work tomorrow. So, but it's just basically that support level, that extra support, more than just in the classroom, provided to our students. A tier
to eliminate tears running down your face.
Thank you.
Quick joke for you. MTSS joke time, everybody.
Wow, okay, let's hear it.
Why did the MTSS teacher break up with their pencil?
I don't know, Brad, why?
Because it lacked support at all tiers, all 3 tiers.
We need the laughing.
The sound effects is not
going to help
today. So anyway, all right. Kylie has kind of told us what MTSS is, but let's dive into the MTSS pool a little deeper.
Okay.
Give us a little more of the framework, what that looks like, the needs, the tiers. Let's talk all things MTSS.
I would love to. That's my favorite thing. Okay, so in MTSS, so multi-tiered, so there's 3 different tiers that we focus on. So tier 1, kind of those universal supports. And what I mean by that is all kids get them. It's mostly things that are happening in the classroom already.
Absolutely.
Then you move to tier 2, which is more individualized. So this is usually specific targeted supports for a group of students. So usually small groups. It can still be a lot of different things, and we'll talk about it later in the pod when we get specific about how it looks here at our school.
And again, those groups could be targeted by behavior, academic needs, social needs, emotional needs, whatever the needs for that specific group are. That's tier 2 intervention level.
And then tier 3 is definitely more intense, more individualized, usually 1-to-1. It's just, it kind of depends. It's hard to describe it because it kind of depends on the situation, but it's definitely more targeted. You're targeting your students with the highest needs in whatever area that might be. And then kind of the next step, what comes after the tiers, may be that special education piece. And we'll get into that later, but the tiers is how we kind of work through needs in our building with our students.
Exactly. And the cool thing about MTSS in my mind is that early detection piece.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times in the past, schools never really had a system of addressing student needs. I mean, you kind of did it by the student at the time and what their needs were. And we're going to talk about this in a minute, I think, Kylie, is just the process of MTSS in identifying needs early and providing interventions early to hopefully have less tears down the road.
But it just, I think it's easier for us to see that part of MTSS here since we are a K-1-2 building, because we have the beginning of of their educational career. So we really, really harp on that early intervention piece, because if we can get them into a tier system in kindergarten, then hopefully by second grade or third grade, when we move them on to our other building, maybe maybe they're getting out of the tier system,
Right.
but we like to have that support.
And I guess that's another thing that I would say, this is not just something we do at our primary building.
Right.
We mentioned other schools do this, but for us, it starts here at the primary building, but it continues all the way through, definitely through the elementary. We want to make sure that our kids who are needing support receive that support as they transition over to the elementary building in third grade. And I know Kylie's going to reference this here in a minute about what that looks like, the documentation that goes along with the kids, and that transition piece, and just how we can continue that support as kids travel through grade level to grade level. So getting ready to move into that, I think it's time for another joke.
I was hoping you'd say that, Brian.
And I think our audience was hoping too. So MTSS joke of the day number 2. Why did the MTSS interventionist, Kylie, you, bring your GPS to work with you?
Oh, why?
Well,
I don't know. Why?
Because finding the root cause of a learning struggle requires a lot of directions.
Neat. That was a knee slapper. That was good.
It was something. I got a couple more. Well, maybe one more. We'll see.
We are lucky that you came up with these
Hopefully
today,
people
Brad.
aren't tuning out at this point. So
on that note, Brad, should we
Kylie?
talk about what MTSS looks like here at our building specifically?
We shall.
Okay. So like he said, the way we run MTSS may be different from another building, your school, totally fine. We've actually changed the way we run MTSS from last year as we've kind of learned and built, and just kind of, it's really based on the needs of your school and your community.
I was just going to say, you really have to find what works best for you. We're going to share what we do. We're not saying this is the be-all, end-all, but it has worked pretty well for our building at this point, and it does keep evolving, and I think we try to keep making it better and better and better as we do this. So, let's talk about that whole process.
So, we start with monthly MTSS meetings. So, we have myself, who's the MTSS coordinator. We have our school psych, who's also our school counselor, our special education teacher, our speech and language pathologist is invited to our meetings, the principal, our Title I teacher, and then whatever grade level we're working on.
Right. We meet at a grade level at a time.
Yeah, we meet at a grade level at a time. We usually do it in the morning. Is that an ideal time to do it? I don't know. We'd love to have more time. We're still kind of working on it.
That's the one. I think the one most difficult part of MTSS process is time, not having enough of it to
really sit down and dig into what we can do for our students and how they're doing, and really be able to collaborate. Definitely could use more time. So that is one thing that, we're still working on. We're still trying to figure out too. So at the monthly meetings, we ask the teachers if they have a student that they're concerned, kind of on the radar, to fill out an information sheet, front and back, just some questions about, is it an academic concern? Is it a behavioral concern? Is it an emotional concern? What is that concern? How are they doing academically? What are some of their testing scores? What are some things that motivate them? What are some things you're doing in the classroom to help? Just an overall kind of not super thorough, but just enough information that we can get started.
And again, these are the kids that teachers are noticing kind of bubbling up from their crowd, because it's tier 1 at this point. And, they're starting to see that there's some kids that have some concerns for whatever reason, struggling reading, behaviors, emotional outbursts, whatever that need may be. It's that first level of identification.
So we ask them to fill that paper out, or that document out, before the meeting. So then they give it to me. I put it in a Word document, or not a Word document. What are those called?
Google Docs.
Google Docs. Shout out Google Docs. And in that document, it's a shared document, so I share it with all the members of the MTSS committee, including the teachers of that grade level. And it has things in it like student name, obviously, teacher, the date that they were referred to MTSS, so we always kind of know, their academic kind of standing, where they are, progress monitoring, I guess you would call it, and then what concerns their teacher is having. Is it academic? Is it behavioral? Is it attendance? And then there's a place where we date every meeting that we have, and we write notes from that meeting.
Yep.
So it's a working document.
It's a data warehouse, in my opinion.
I think it's a really good tool that we can go back, and we often do almost daily. Go back to it and check. Oh, what did we say we were doing with this kid, or what what's changed? Those kind of things.
And I just want to throw in one of the nice changes I've seen this year in that process for us as a school and as Kylie's doing as an interventionist. Last year it was very anecdotal. She would add notes as we met with kids, and then we'd come back the next month and we'd add more notes and we'd add more notes. This year Kylie kind of brainstormed and got the idea to put in more data type things, graphs, NWEA scores, more visuals, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. Intervention data. And it really gives a quick snapshot of the kid in having all that data in one place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really like it, and it's been easy, but it's good for everybody, because a lot of times, if a student goes to an intervention, a title group, we have a cougar time that they go to, maybe the teachers don't always see all that data. So to have it all on one page. So some of the data that we do put in this document are NWA scores. And it's nice as we've started to move forward, because we have fall now and winter. So it's nice to see that comparison. Sometimes I'll put in the graph of their previous scores before this year too, to see if they've kind of fluctuated in different ways. We put our MAP reading fluency scores and our dyslexia screener information. We put any title updates that they might have, any tier 3 data that they might have. If there's any speech concerns that, something that's gone on in speech, we add in.
And if we do get to that point of recommending testing or evaluation, we start documenting it there too, that we've got parents' permission, and that
if we've had a parent meeting,
we
try to put as much information as we can for that student in that area. And like Brad talked about earlier, one, it's important for us to do that just so we can help the student best, and we all kind of have that shared information. But two, when the student transitions to next year for a new teacher, or when they move to third grade in a new building, this document is able to go with them, so the teachers there can just kind of take off where we've left off, and they can have that background information, and it's all right there. And I think that, I'm glad you said that, Brad, because I think that has been a really beneficial improvement that we've made this year for that.
For sure. I'd like to talk, Kylie, a little bit about maybe, we said tier 1's pretty easy. It's classroom instruction. It's what everybody's getting at any given time of the day. But once we've identified some kids through that MTSS process, and we've documented, or we've discussed strategies, because that's one thing we do in the meeting too, and why we have so many people there is to, okay, here's the issue, here's the need, what can we do to address it at tier 2 and at tier 3? And you run several groups throughout the day at the tier 2 and tier 3 level. Maybe talk a little bit about what those tier 2 groups look like, tier 3, and differences and similarities.
And I do want to add one thing from our meetings. The meetings are not, they are a big part of it, is to collect that data and get everything down and hear what the teachers are saying. But I like what Brad said with, we want to provide strategies, and we want to provide things and ideas to help the students, for the teachers to take back right then and there and leave that meeting with some ideas.
Some action
and
items
all of
and
us
ideas.
have a plan and an action. So I like that you mentioned that. So like he said, tier 1, kind of the basic things that you're doing in your classroom. A lot of times, like I would consider our amplified curriculum that we use kind of a tier 1 strategy. Just the everyday things that teachers are wonderful at doing. So then we move into tier 2, like Brad said. So tier 2 is really when they get into MTSS. That's what we consider it when they've been brought up for MTSS. This is where we do small group interventions on whatever it may be. So this is where our title groups fall. So our titles focuses primarily on reading intervention, so that's where these would fall. Small group pullouts, so this might be for us, it's usually right now and where we are is reading instruction. That just kind of, but it could be math. I do have a pullout math group that I take also.
But reflect back, we're a primary building, and I feel like our main goal here is to produce readers.
Exactly. So it makes sense, but your building may look a little bit different. You may have different things. I know a school that my friend teaches at, they have a math groups that they pull out because that's a focus in their building. So, and then check-ins with students, I would consider a tier 2. So we have multiple students that we check in with daily, whether that be just kind of us popping into the room, seeing them in the hallway. Sometimes they come down to us in the office. It just kind of depends, but I'd consider those a tier 2.
And it can be informal and formal. We have some kids that actually have a written plan through the day, whether it's a point sheet or a behavior plan that incorporates those check-ins and check-out kind of things. But it can be, like I said, very formal or informal, but it's a part of the process.
A lot of times Brad and I just jump down to lunch or recess and just kind of check in with kids. And we have a lot of people that do that here. So I would consider that a tier 2 strategy. Our counselor does a really nice job with kind of the emotional, social, behavioral side of it. As far as small groups with that, I think we talked about that maybe in our last pod a little bit. Yep. Right now she has a group that's talking about personal space, not touching other people. Impulse control, the pirates.
I got to watch that group yesterday.
Yeah,
Kristen
cool.
was working with them. And
she wears a pirate costume. Like, it's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny, but kids are engaged with it and they're learning from it. So
exactly. So shout out to Kristen Alexander, our school psychologist.
Shout out.
Yeah. So she does a really good job with those kind of groups, pulling those students in. And then we do what's called Cougar Time intervention here. So we have a built-in time in our schedule, each grade level does, where it's an intervention time, which is really great to have because we all know how crazy a day can be. So this time we have a couple grade levels that group their students by skill. So you have students that need the most support, all the way up to the students that have mastered it and need to be pushed beyond that skill. So I would consider this a tier 2 also because it's small group intervention. Right. So you're meeting students at the level that they are in a smaller group setting. So those would all be kind of tier 2 strategies that we use here. Again, you may have a lot of other ones, and please share them. We would love to kind of collaborate about that. But
collaborate and listen.
Stop. Collaborate and listen. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. So,
it wasn't a joke, but it was funny. Go ahead.
So then we move to tier 3. So when we collect data, usually it just kind of depends on the student, month, 3 months, 6 months, weeks. I mean, there's not I can't say a specific.
No, we kind of set those timelines per kid in those MTSS meetings of, like, we're going to try this strategy for 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks.
And I also think it depends on, is it a behavior issue that we're dealing with? Is it a academic? Like, it just kind of depends. So once we collect data for the specific amount of time through all those different interventions, those different groups, we come back to our MTSS group and we say, listen, we're not seeing growth. We're still seeing, issues in the classroom. What's our next step? And that's when we get to tier 3. So this is where it is one-on-one specific individual student needs that we are working with. Yep. This is where, Kristen as our school counselor might meet with students one-on-one to work on something specific as far as a behavior. We have behavior plans for individual students that Brad talked about earlier, but this is where, those point sheets, those check-ins, the oops cards, I would consider that a tier 3 because that is an individualized thing for that student. I pull out a lot of individual students for groups that I would consider tier 3. I do mostly academic groups. Right. Mostly reading. I do have a new math group, though, that I work with a student. So this is where I can just work one-on-one with students. These are our highest need students academically. And again, I'm thankful that we have Kristen as our school psychologist and our school counselor because we work well together as far as she focuses more on the behavioral piece for those one-on-ones and I'm able to focus on the academic. But we both help each other out with all those. Right.
And one thing you just said, Kylie, that we haven't talked about is, you talked about some of the most highly academic needs. We're not just talking the bottom end of our struggling readers. Kylie also works with the top end students too, because again, those students have academic needs and sometimes even social, emotional needs that need to be addressed. Talking high ability learners, gifted and talented. So it's not just our struggling students academically, it's also our students that need that extra push and to go deeper into content curriculum, and she works with those groups as well.
I think that can be a common misconception too about MTSS, because it is, like you just said, it is not just that those lower kids that need those, but especially in academics, it can be those higher kids. And being able to provide those individualized, so I should have said kind of those high ability groups that we run would be probably a tier 2.
I just wanted to throw that in there too, so that I don't want people to just assume it's so the kids that are really struggling.
Yeah, no, it can literally be any student across the board, and that's again what makes it kind of a unique position.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say that's kind of how we, our tier steps, and then after, so if we get through tier 3, we have that individual. We still have the tier 1. The students are still doing all the tier 2, still doing all the tier 3, because you kind of build up. If we're still not seeing the results that we want, students are still struggling, students are still needing some extra support, then that is when, after we've collected all the data, then that is when we would move into potentially talking about special education and those kind of things. It's not a guarantee, but we really, really try hard to make sure we're going through all those steps before we just jump into special education.
And by law in Article 7, we need that kind of data for that process to happen. 10, 15 years ago, I think it was a lot easier for a teacher just to come to the principal or counselor or special ed teacher and be like, Johnny needs an IEP because they're not performing well in math or reading. And, we would maybe do some screening and say, yeah, we're seeing some issues here. But those days are gone.
They're gone, right.
There's a lot of steps and documentation that needs to happen before a student gets sent off or not sent off, but, gets testing done.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, to do an evaluation. So obviously parents can always still request that at any given time because that's their right and under Article 7. But again, as the school's standpoint, we want to collect data and show that there is truly a need here for more evaluations to happen.
We want to make sure that we are doing as a staff the best for our students, that we're not just jumping hoops, that we are providing what we can in intervention-wise and doing everything we can to before we would hit that kind of that special education. So that's, again, kind of how we work our tier system. It can look different in different places. This has been what's worked for us, and it's a work in progress still, and we're always trying to build on it. But I've been happy with how it's been going this year for sure.
And I would say, as dismal as maybe some of this sounds, because it is hard work, and nobody likes to see kids struggle, but we have kids that struggle. It's kind of like when babies learn to walk. Not everybody learns to walk at the same pace at the same time. It's an evolution, and our kids don't always learn and acquire skills at the same time. So we are going to have kids at all ends of the spectrum. But my point is, we do see celebrations. We give some kids some tier 2 interventions, and we come back in a month and say, how are they doing? Oh, they've taken off. They're showing growth and progress. Or maybe it's that tier 3 intervention that finally clicks for the student.
Absolutely.
And we do see growth. So I don't want people to just assume like, well, we go to tier 2, then we go to tier 3, and then we go to SPED. We do have success stories.
We really do. And I would say that we have more success stories than not.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of kids and maybe they do stay in a tier 2 when they go up to the elementary school, but that's okay. Just that little bit of extra support still gets them through. But I definitely would say we have more celebrations than we do, not. So that's awesome. But
and that's the be all end all.
Exactly.
That's the goal.
We're doing what's best for the kids.
Yeah, it's what the process and end result of MTSS really should be, is some celebrations along the way. So
I just want to kind of finish it with just a couple tips.
Let's hear it.
If you're out there in a school thinking, we kind of do this, the biggest thing for us is data collection, I think, and that's what we've really learned from having our school psych in our building as our counselor too, how important collecting that data is. And that is really what drives what we do in our interventions. We need to be able to collect that data and work together and collaborate to be able to know if we're doing the best for our students.
And data can be also daunting because, where do you start? But I think start at the basic level, classroom grades, attendance, We do NWEA 3 times a year, so bring that in. Any kind of assessments, formative, summative assessments that you do, that's data. Then go deeper into those strategies and interventions that you're doing and progress monitor, whether that's just notes of progress or actual...
I mean, it can be something as simple as I read with my students on Monday, Wednesday, Friday on a certain thing, and we write it down and I document it.
Yep.
Or I check we do tricky words every day. We practice them every day, and then once a month, I test them on them.
Yep.
And that is what my data shows. It doesn't, and I think I've worked on that over the years too, thinking, oh my gosh, I need all this data. But really, it's simple. It's just simple things to show that students are what they're working on and the growth that they're making.
Right on.
So, data, collaborating, building relationships with each other, working together. I think that's the biggest takeaways for me from MTSS.
Celebrate the wins when you have them, and don't get bogged down by the stumbling blocks that you may have along the way. It's a process. It's not gonna, MTSS is not gonna fix a kid overnight. It takes time.
It takes time
and work and a group effort.
Do you have a last joke for
Funny
us?
that you should ask.
Do you have one more joke? Because
haha.
I think we need a joke to kind of end this.
Let's wrap
episode.
this up with a joke about MTSS, because I really can't think of a more comedic topic.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's not a funny
MTSS
topic.
hilarious.
It's a serious topic. But we wanted to try to make it a little funny along the way today. So one last joke for MTSS. Why did the MTSS teacher bring a flashlight to class, Kylie?
Why?
Because they're always shining a light on student news.
Oh, I like what you did with that one. That was good, Brad.
Hey, it's the end of episode 7.
It is. Do you want to tease what we're doing next week?
Let's cue up some music and tease a little bit here. Next week, we will have a guest with us. We are going to have Cindy Scheiber, our special education teacher, to talk all things SPED. We felt like that'd be a great topic to jump into after MTSS.
Yep.
So
I'm excited.
She's super excited.
She's very funny. She might be funnier than we are.
Probably a lot more funny than we
are. You're going to really enjoy getting to meet Cindy Schreiber next week.
So hey, have a great week, everybody. Bring us any ideas, tips, questions that you have after listening to these podcasts. We appreciate it. Hey, t-shirts are being produced right now. Mm-hmm. Be on the lookout.
Yep. Order forms will be coming out soon.
So yeah, I think that's it. Kylie, it's your turn.
All right. And on that note, class dismissed.